Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to another episode of Topical Talkology. We'll probably have to apologise for last week because we got cut short because the battery ran out on our equipment. But last week we were talking about a little bit about private schools and we were talking about relationships and things like this, and we want to probably expand on a little bit on that further, but I'd just like to say hello to Theo this morning.
Hello Andy, how are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
Excellent, thank you.
Excellent, good. So you've been doing a lot of research this last week on some of the content we were discussing last week. But I want to bring the matter to private schools because even though sort of Jeremy Corbyn talked about abolishing private schools, obviously there's certain things have come out which says actually it's never going to happen and it would be a big loser. But it infuriated me a little bit because the thing is you're taking the choice and the decision away from parents on how they actually want to raise their children, and you're basically saying this is what the state teaches and this is what you're going to have to learn whether you actually like it or not. And if you actually disagree with that, it's basically tough, which means it's actually basically is socialism in its fullest, isn't it?
Yes, that's one way of looking at it.
Okay, thanks for that insight. So it infuriated me because I chose to send my daughter to a private school because I not only wanted to give her a better education, but I also wanted to learn certain values, teach her to become self-reliant, take personal responsibility, which is something that state schools don't necessarily teach you. And it's something that you actually sent an article to me the other day about how I think it was mothers talk to their children. Do you want to expand on that a little bit? Tell
me more.
In a controlling way. So if children speak to, if you speak to teenagers, particularly in a controlling way, they're less likely to do their homework.
Correct. Whereas
if you actually give them the choice, they're more likely to actually do it. Do you not see any flaws in that, or is it just me?
Well, you see, that's the wrong reasoning. It's all to do with mirror neurons. So what happens is homework is not something that a kid is likely to want to do. So if you talk to them in a controlling manner, in other words, if you apply negativity and you juxtapose that to the idea of homework, then you remind them that they simply don't want to do the homework, so they're not going to do it. It's actually very simple. So in other words, if you want your kid to do homework, then you either just mention it in as lighter and positive a manner as possible, or you say, or you tell them that you assume they're going to do their homework, so that they're going to have dinner after they finish their homework or something nice after they finish, because of course they're going to do it. But if you apply, come on, hurry up and do your homework, then that's negative. And it just reminds them they don't want to do it and they will simply resist you more.
But do you not think that when they're going to go into the workplace, they are less likely to meet those hard deadlines from their bosses and their managers and things like this, where they actually have going to deal with a strong level of authority if they've been put in that space where actually do your homework and and then we'll have dinner and things like this, because you're going to get certain children who are not going to be internally motivated to do their homework, and if they're not internally motivated, then actually they're less likely to do it either way, whether if you just give them the choice.
Oh, well, again, you're right, but of course you can equate that to management styles, can't you? So if you have the bullying critical boss, the micromanaging boss, then they have a far less productive workforce.
Admittedly, I will say that, but and this is where it sort of fits into what we're talking about private schools in some ways, because there's a level of expectation when you go to a private school that you've got to consistently deliver. Yes. And then because you're dealing in an environment that's already operating in a high standard, you almost see it though you actually have to meet that standard because the standard is a little bit higher.
Not only that, but of course the private schools base their reputation on getting the kids into the next elite echelon of education. So primary schools base their reputation on getting the kids into the established big secondary schools, like St Paul's, Harrow, Westminster, Eton, those secondary schools, whereas those secondary schools then base their reputation on getting kids into Oxford and Cambridge. So in a way, in a way, if the ultimate is Oxford and Cambridge, then you do need those elite schools.
But isn't that a case of actually sort of instilling a vision in them of where they are going to be heading, or where they should head, and also a sense of purpose as to what they should achieve, which is something that is not really sort of taught so much in the state school system. And I haven't got a problem with the state school system.
Well, no, you're right. That's very beautifully put. That is the main power of the private schools if they're properly run. And of course you do get some properly run state schools who do give you this ethos of expectation of achievement and standards and morality, but let's face it, those are very distressingly in the minority, and that is why parents will fight tooth and nail to get their kids into these schools or to move into catchment areas, or are because they're often Catholic schools, they're willing to suddenly become devout Catholics and get the priest's certificate. That's like
going to church to get into this.
Precisely.
Yes, of course.
So that that's the importance of good education. But in the absence of that being the norm, then of course it's really important that kids can have access to the right kind of education, because it has psychological as well as academic effects.
But if you don't like the fact, and I know there's been some incidents recently that have come out in the media, and I haven't got a problem with the whole LGBTQ, but the thing is the way that they're changing some of the literature and the education that they're actually putting in, attaching to it. Now, if some people brought up in a different faith, other thing is, you can be tolerant, but the thing is, you don't actually have to agree with those belief systems, particularly if you brought up of a faith. And as the world's changing, and we're looking to become more acceptable of that, which is fine, you're expecting everybody to catch up and change the whole belief system overnight, and which is where I struggle with. And I don't think that is a place for the school to teach. They're supposed to teach academia, not supposed to teach your family values. And I suppose that goes for private schools as well.
No, you see,
but it's not. At least it's not forced down their throats.
Actually, I view the main function of private school as academia is there, but it's not the most important. The most important is the sense, as you said before, that you are being groomed to succeed, that you develop your expectation to succeed. Because in life, you rarely get what you deserve, but you almost always get what you expect, as research has shown time and again. And that's the difficulty. State school does not provide that. Now, of course, you could argue that if you abolished private school, and of course they weren't talking about abolishing private school, apparently they were talking about abolishing their charitable status, which would make it therefore a lot harder for them to function. You could argue that if parents didn't have access to private school, then they would become a lot more vocal about improving the state schools. But the other point to make is then they would place a huge demand on the state system, because suddenly all the parents who are paying their taxes and paying for the state school system but not taking up the place will now be demanding to take up that place. So I think it is possible to run to have a good state school system, but it would need to be massively overhauled.
But what will also happen, though, and I think we discussed this last week, that those people those parents who do have money and actually do want to invest money into their child's future, which is the right, they're entitled to do, it's their money, and they should spend it how they should and how they want to. And they will obviously hire private tutors and things like this, so they'll always have that level of advantage. Now, if you want your kids to be successful, even if you're in the state school system, whatever system you're in, I think you've actually got to be successful yourself, because that's where they'll become more conditioned by the environment at home. Do you not? For the parents to set the example, and for the children to learn from the parents, yes, absolutely. Yeah, because
that's
the school is only the school's not there to actually give it's not a childcare centre where they actually take full responsibility. You as a parent have got enough responsibilities at home to be able to that you've got to take responsibility for as well, on how you choose to actually bring them up, on what you actually want to teach them, right or wrong. I mean, I'm not criticizing. I don't want to criticise, because there'll be people who will bring up the kids in a manner that I don't agree with. Now, and I said I think we argued this probably last week ago, that my daughter says I actually brought up as a feminist, and actually said, I think you've got a very wrong interpretation of what I think you think feminism is. I taught you to be self-reliant, and I taught you to take personal responsibility for your actions, and that is very much being non-reliant on a state and actually taking control of your own lifestyle, which is not feminism. Because I'm not asking for, I don't want to have any special treatment. I just wanted to have the equal treatment that everyone should get, and not have this social justice of identity politics going around, which is what's happening right now, and it's actually really sad to see. It
is very sad, and it's dangerous. But yeah, I mean, schools have so many functions. And academia is important, but it's almost not the core. It's the sense of responsibility, community, standards, civility, rule following, respect for authority, and of course the parallels should be occurring at home as well. When I take my son to school, the headmaster or the priest, because it's a Catholic school, stand in front of the school gates, watching everyone come in, and it's with a fatherly, shall we say, smile on their face. And you know what? I like it. Because it does show interest in the pupils, a sense of community, a sense of authority as well, and welcoming. That's all important, rather than just throwing your kid at the school gates and you're worried that they're going to get stabbed.
And also, one thing you've got to consider as well, though, I mean, there's one type of culture, I suppose, in the classroom. There's very much a different environment and culture in the playground, and this is where they actually form their relationships. They ultimately form a lot of their confidence and basically sort of where they fit into their groups. And I think I was speaking to someone last week, and they didn't, you say, oh yeah, it was popular. So yeah, but you weren't in the clique you really actually wanted to be in. So there's a lot and that still goes on today, even in whatever manner, you associate who you actually want to associate.
Playgrounds are unbelievably important, because the play is fundamental to not only humans, but all organisms with awareness. So for instance, even in rats have a play circuit, and it's been shown that the strong rat. So, for instance, if you have a subordinate rat and the dominant rat, it is the subordinate rat who initiates play with the dominant. Now, the dominant knows that it can beat the subordinate, but unless the dominant lets the subordinate win 1/3 of the time, the subordinate will no longer initiate play. So the dominant rat will not get to play, because it's the subordinate one who initiates it. And that piece of behaviour is fundamental throughout all humans. So, for instance, that's the reason why clever businessmen say always leave something on the table for your opponent. Otherwise, nobody will ever do business with you again. So people who try and get to the last bit of juice out of any possible deal or any kind of relationship, they might think they've benefited from that particular game, but they've lost the overall match.
Well, it's about getting to that win-win scenario, isn't it? Where they both walk away thinking they've actually won something. But and probably the other point I actually wanted to discuss was relationships, and I want to let you kick this one off, because we were talking about it highly last week, and you brought it up in terms of. Do you want to jump in on this one, because this was your.
Yes.
This is what you wanted to discuss. Because you watched an article or a video last week about someone.
Yeah, absolutely. There's we were talking about relationships last week, and I saw a very interesting talk by a psychiatrist called George Blair, a very senior man who was invited to do a TED talk. And he put up a slide showing us the major stresses in life based on research. Now, the top 3 stresses were death of a child, so obviously we can relate to that, and divorce and separation. And number 7 was marriage. And if you think about that carefully, he then said, well, you know, at least 40% of us, if not more, are going to end up getting divorced, and that number is getting worse over time. He then went on to say that the good prognostic factors are tertiary education and having more money. And of course that tends to go along with being a bit older. So he said the older you are when you get married, the more likely you are to stay married, because you're more likely to have better education and to have